Good morning and welcome back to another episode of the JaguarReport podcast. It's been about 9 whole days since we last recorded, so I'm not exactly sure which episode we're on. I believe it's 93. Does that sound right, John?
It's 93, buddy. This is the Jared Audrick episode.
Welcome to episode 93, everyone. We are 6 weeks away from the NFL draft. The first wave of free agency is complete. John, how you doing? We're kind of sort of getting there. We're not anywhere close. You can't see the finish line yet, but we're like maybe making our way around the turn of draft season.
I can see it. It's crazy. You said it was 9 days ago we recorded. It doesn't feel like 9 days ago, man. It's been like move after move after move. Let me go ahead and take back to Jared Audrick. Evidently, he wore 75, not 93.
I'm just going to let that one go.
Yeah, this is the Calais Campbell episode. I don't know why I went Audrick over Campbell anyway.
Calais is a little bit too, probably.
Yeah, that's the vibe we're in. No, I'm good, man. It's been an insanely busy time. It feels like, specifically covering the Jaguars, this is always a normally crazy busy time. There's been one offseason covering them where they haven't spent money for me, and that was last offseason. And I can't tell you which one I prefer, but it definitely seems like this offseason, it was like move after move after move. At least in my opinion, they were more aggressive in adding guys than I thought they would be. Do you disagree with that? I didn't expect them to – I don't know if say spend is the right word, because when you break it down, they didn't really give out any major contracts, but they definitely added a few guys on like starter level deals more so than I thought they would.
Yeah, even the Armstead deal, like the contract details came out earlier today before we recorded, and it's not – I mean, it's a solid deal. Like, it's not like they like really had to overpay to get that kind of caliber into Jacksonville. And so I think, like you said, like all the contracts are like reasonable, but I think I agree with you in that they were kind of aggressive because all of their moves, other than signing like a fourth string edge rusher and then a maybe second string kicker, came in the first couple of days of free agency. Like, we were obviously waiting around for kind of Calvin Ridley development. Since we had to wait until the new league year opened on Wednesday for anything to happen with that. But I think besides Ridley and Armstead and those other two guys I just mentioned, like all the other moves came within the first 2 or 3 days. And so there's definitely like no waiting around, sitting on your hands, waiting to like fill the holes. They definitely got it done early.
I mean, they tried to sign a kicker in like the second hour of tampering.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
To show how aggressive they were. So, I mean, let's get right into it, Gus. We already talked about Mitch Morse and Mac Jones last week, so go ahead and ignore them. I think we were both in agreement that Mitch Morse was a really solid signing for them. They obviously improved that center a good bit. Hearing him talk about potentially competing with Luke Fortner was it was a good bit. It's like, yeah, you know, he can't say anything else, but
right.
We know, dude. We know. So, moving past those, let's just go ahead and go in order here. Gabe Davis, 3 years, $39 million. He got, what was it, 24, 25 million guaranteed around that range. I think he's like receiver number 25 in average annual value. He obviously isn't the 25th best receiver in football, but I mean, that's more or less what happens when you spend in free agency. Like, in terms of like free agency, like wide receiver deals in the last couple of years, he's like probably like top 10 in terms of contracts he's gotten. He's obviously not in the Calvin Ridley range, but he's still, for people, like I had people look at the deal and say, oh, that's not that much. No, it's still a sizable contract for the guy.
Yeah.
What is your read on it? Because to me, I thought the idea of Gabe Davis joining Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk was really good, with the caveat that he'd be the most expensive fourth receiving option in NFL history.
Yeah.
On the other hand, now that obviously he will not be joining Calvin Ridley, and for the people saying, that the Jags signed Davis and never want to bring Ridley, Gabe Davis literally himself said that he thought Calvin Ridley would be on the team when he joined. My read on it is, we talked about him some before. I think he's a really good fit with Trevor Lawrence, because he's the kind of receiver that just like fits well with Lawrence's style. Lawrence, he's got some, YOLO ball to him, to where it seems like he's always needed a big receiver who he can just kind of put it in there, radius and give them a chance to get it. He's obviously has a ton of experience on scramble drills and getting himself open after playing with Josh Allen on really strong blocker. He's like to me, like the Calvin Ridley role last year is like the ideal like Gabe Davis role, like just a ton of sideline routes, pretty much planning him at the X, letting him take on the press and do some of the dirty work. In terms of downsides, like I think we'll get into them. There are a few, but overall, like it's not like they signed a bad player. I think he's better than when they signed Zay Jones a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think it just makes so much sense as a fit. You kind of went over all the reasons why it's a good on-field fit. Like it's definitely the type of receiver that would theoretically do well with Trevor Lawrence. And then in terms of off the field, like there's a connection with Chad Hall, who coaches receivers now in Jacksonville, used to be the Buffalo Bills receiver coach. Davis was born in Fernandina Beach and then was raised in Central Florida and went to UCF. And in his introductory presser, he talked about like wanting to come back home to Florida. And so there's a lot of reasons that like it kind of makes sense, but I feel like it's just there's a little bit of buyer beware because I don't think the contract is like asinine or anything close to that, but it's just that Davis was such an inconsistent player in Buffalo, and it was even with an extremely talented quarterback and an extremely talented like receiver on the other side, like kind of taking away coverage and attention. And so like it was funny. He posted a lot of statistics on his Instagram when he was like hitting free agency that like his agent or someone must have kind of rounded up for him. And it said like first in like basically since he's been in the league in the past 4 years, since 2020, he's like first in yards per target, first in yards per reception, first in explosive play rate, like all of these like cool metrics. And then at the bottom, it's like 45th in target rate. And I think it's meant to be like, he was trying to say like, oh, imagine if you gave me more targets, I'll be like an all pro every year. But it's like, no, it doesn't really work like that. It's like usually when you get more volume, you get less efficient. And so that's kind of the deal with him. I think if he's like a wide receiver 3, then he can be great because he won't get a lot of volume and he can be probably efficient with that. But if you're asking him to be like a wide receiver 2, which is kind of the circumstance now, then I'm a little bit more skeptical about that one.
See, I think he can be like a number 2 if you have another guy across from him, like he did in Buffalo. Like I feel like he was probably like a low end 2 in Buffalo. I thought Buffalo was like the perfect kind of like fit and description for him. Because like you said, there'd be some weeks he didn't do anything, some weeks he'd explode. He was an auxiliary option. He was never a focal point of the offense, and
right.
I think that's where some teams get in trouble in free agency is they pay role players to be more than they are. Foley Fatukasi is a great recent example. The Jags thought he could be a 3-down player, paid him like such. He wasn't that in New York. They were obviously projecting, and then he clearly was not that in Jacksonville. So you're always going to run into the risk of that. I think like maybe that's why I thought if Ridley was returning, he'd be such a good fit because it'd more or less be the same expectations that they were in Buffalo, just for a significantly higher price tag. Is there any argument to make that with a heavier workload, he can lead like a passing attack, be the focal point of it?
I feel like maybe the biggest argument for that would be like kind of more off field than on the field because I think he's been lauded for being an extremely hard worker and like a good locker room guy in Buffalo. And so like maybe he is only, I think, 25 years old. So maybe you could kind of convince yourself that since he is such a hard worker and has a good work ethic, then like maybe he's got a little bit more juice left in the tank. Like maybe he could be utilized in some different ways. Like he was such a vertical threat in Buffalo. Maybe like, I mean, Doug loves a good like crossing pattern or just drag route over the middle of the field, like 5 yards downfield. And so maybe we'll see him get into those like almost Evan Engram type routes. And so maybe his hard work and like different utilization will help him take off a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think like he kind of is what he is at this point.
Is Gabe Davis, Christian Kirk, and Zay Jones better than Marvin Jones, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk? And the only caveat I'd add is probably Zay Jones was better in 2022 than he'll probably be in 2024, just with age and injuries factor in. Which receiver room are you going with there?
Oh, that's a tough one, honestly. I think Marvin was really frustrating. Like he was a really good, like kind of less so like contested catch guy and more so just like I don't know.
Fades and stuff like that.
I was gonna say he was like pretty clutch, honestly. Like he would come up with contested catches, like not just on like a third down here and there, but like on like a third down with the game on the line here and there.
Yeah.
So like that type of like kind of veteran presence and clutch factor has kind of been missed a little bit. Like Ridley had flashes of it last year. Christian Kirk has had flashes of it, but they don't have like a dude. And like Marvin Jones was like a little bit could kind of sort of be that for you sometimes. I don't know if Gabe Davis is going to be that, but at the same time, he's just like so much more explosive, especially at like this stage of their kind of respective careers. That I would say Davis is an upgrade over Jones, Marvin Jones, and then I feel like I get what you're saying about Zay Jones probably being a little worse in 2024 than 2022, but like that's essentially a wash. Same with Christian Kirk. So I think this current lineup is better. Um, yeah, I think the 2023 lineup would be the best, especially if you could like say Zay Jones is actually healthy for
I
a
was
year.
gonna say if everybody's healthy, yeah. It's definitely been copium losing Ridley. People comparing Ridley and Davis. I mean, the NFL told you like how they value them, and I mean, even the Jaguars have, like just specifically looking at the contracts, have said that it goes Christian Kirk, then Gabe Davis. Is Gabe Davis the number 2 pass catcher on the offense right now? Or is he number 3 behind Ingram?
I'd say number 3 behind Ingram.
I kind of lean 3-2 because they simply are going to keep throwing Ingram the ball until his body falls apart. So, yeah, I'm with you there. It's definitely an interesting signing because I see a lot of positives, but there's also like some obvious negatives. But I don't think it's like a glaringly bad signing. I think it's probably like a wash.
Yeah, I gave it a B minus on the grades tracker I'm doing for 1010.
I gave it a C plus, so that's where we're at. B minus, C plus. The homer, the realist, etc. I kid.
Come on.
I kid. All right, on to the next one. Darnell Savage, Green Bay Packers. I don't think anybody knows what the hell position. Like,
this one shocked me.
If I had to guess, he's just replacing Rayshon Jenkins, in my opinion. That's fine. I've seen people ask if he's the nickel. I don't think so. I think he's just replacing Rayshon Jenkins, and that I'm thinking an L. I'm thinking Antonio Johnson would, be a starter because I don't think Antonio Johnson's starting the nickel either. Yeah. I mean, they can try it, see what happens.
It's the thing they could do. Yeah, I was trying to like kind of pinpoint, like right after the signing, I was like, okay, so what does this mean? The Savage in the slot and then Antonio's going to be safety or vice versa? And I was just kind of like pigeonholing into those 2 roles. But I'm with you now that we've kind of had some time to let it breathe. And then like hearing Savage at his introductory press conference, I think that Savage and Antonio Johnson are both safeties that are kind of like meant to replace Rayshon Jenkins, and Savage will probably be the one that starts.
Yeah, it makes sense.
New contract.
It makes sense because Savage has a lot of like experience covering tight ends and stuff, which was more or less Rayshon's role in a lot of senses in Jacksonville. You saw him take on a lot of the tight end responsibilities as opposed to Andre Cisco. So you get a guy who can do that. He obviously has athletic traits. He tested really good coming out of Maryland. The contract, it's what, 3 years, 21.5, I think, million, like 12 million, near that guaranteed. He ranks like 15th, I think, in average annual value among safety. So it's not like they paid out of the nose, but I do think considering his production in Green Bay, high missed tackle rates, not a ton of ball production, he probably got a little bit of that first round tax in the deal. Same with Javon Kinlaw in New York. Like, oh, this guy was a first rounder. He gets a little more money poured into the
Yeah. I thought like the contract certainly isn't atrocious in any way, but I thought it like, I don't know, the safety market is so weird now. Like it's almost like linebackers and running backs where like a team isn't really going to like want to shell out money. They would rather just like get a cheaper replacement in the draft. And so I thought it would have made more sense for the Jaguars to either like get a rookie in the upcoming draft that's kind of like cost controlled, or to just like sign a safety but just have it be a cheaper one. Like if Savage had signed for a 1-year flyer, like, I don't think I would have scoffed at the price tag regardless of what it is, because I would have been like, okay, he's a good athlete, former first rounder. It's a 1-year contract. It's like, who cares? Let's do it. But the fact that they got 3 years, which I mean, essentially could end up being like just a 1 or 2 year deal if he gets cut after 1 or 2 years. But I was a little bit just surprised by I don't know how much contract security he ended up getting because he was at one point, if not multiple times, benched for former Jaguar Rudy Ford when he was in Green Bay, and so like he's definitely. You mentioned the missed tackle rates; it's not not good, and so he kind of was not falling off a little bit, I guess, in Green Bay. But I guess the thing that would make me a little bit more optimistic is that like hey, I'm just sitting here on a Zoom talking to you and not working in a front office. So maybe those guys know something I don't. But also, I think from a scheme perspective, like the Packers have been kind of known under Joe Barry to be extremely conservative, the type of defense that's like bend don't break. We're going to let everything kind of in front of us happen rather than letting anyone get behind us. And so I think Savage is like a better fit for Nielsen's scheme, which is more like attacking and aggressive and kind of going to the ball rather than kind of like backpedaling and being more conservative. And so maybe with like just 1 year under Nielsen and kind of a different scheme could kind of unlock him.
Yeah, it's like the same thing as like Ezra Cleveland to me, where the biggest thing might not be the money, but the fact that he's more or less locked in for multiple years as a starter. It's basically a 2-year deal. I think he's going to be starting at safety for the next 2 years. I think you made a great point with the scheme. Like I think safety especially, there's so much variance in play based on like where you are and how you fit into that specific scheme. Like I truly think safety is like one of those schemes where a guy can be a potential all-pro on one team and then be like a below average starter on another one based on what he's asked to do. So the fact that they went after Savage so early in free agency, I don't think anybody had Darnell Savage as like one of the
Right.
first defensive backs off the board. Shows you, they prioritized him. They must have, some kind of plan for him. So, we'll obviously see there. To me, I think it's probably the most questionable signing, but at the end of the day, it's not that much. It's not.
Yeah, it's definitely the most questionable. You can talk yourself into it at the same time.
They've made more expensive questionable signings in the past few seasons than Darnell, Savage. He's, like I said, they're not paying out the nose for him or anything like that. I'd say one of the biggest things that was probably like you mentioned, battling that market deficiency at safety and getting a cheaper guy. Both my arguments against the Savage and Duvernay signings are that they had like cheap dudes on rookie contracts who could theoretically play that role. Maybe though Ryan Nielsen doesn't, Antonio Johnson was drafted into Mike Caldwell's defense. Maybe Ryan Nielsen isn't as high on, Antonio Johnson as a potential starting safety. But I would argue that if he does like Antonio Johnson, then you're probably better off, taking your licks with him on a 5th-year contract. And then my other thing would be, I don't know, this is nitpicky, but Justin Simmons is still a free agent. you could have theoretically, maybe gone after. I mean, Justin Simmons, adding him to that defense and Eric Armstead, that'd be a game changer.
Holy cow.
They obviously, it seemed like outside of Armstead and Mitch Morris were going for younger guys. And if you want to make the argument, between Rayshon Jenkins and Darnell Savage, that's the one to make. Savage is younger and he's more athletic. That's really what it looks like, they're doing at the safety position. They're just getting younger, more athletic than what they had last year. So it'll definitely be interesting. All right. What was your grade on that one? I'm a guess. B-.
No, So I was gonna say I did initial grades because I did write up for the site pretty much as they were happening. So my initial grade for Savage was a C. Now that we're thinking about it, I think I'll just change it to a C+. Honestly, I don't want to grade myself too much.
You've done a great job, by the way, with all of your content and draft and free agency stuff. I recommend everybody who listens to us to go ahead and check out Gus's work at 1010. He's done a great job. Very, very proud of him. With that said,
let me just plug something real quick. We've got a big draft guide coming out on Monday, so just keep your eyes out for that.
Heck yeah. Can't wait to base all my takes off that. Oh, yeah. I'll go with C minus.
I'm working hard on the comps. I'll tell you that the player comps is what I'm working hardest on.
You're good at comps, to be honest. I'll give you that. You are good at comps. I saw somebody told me like NFL.com comped Nate Wiggins to Tyson Campbell. I'm like,
Yeah, come on, man. Come on.
If you add nearly 30 pounds and their willingness to tackle, maybe. But no.
Yeah, that I feel like sometimes people like not necessarily like this example, but just sometimes people will try to get like too hipster with their like player comps. And I don't know. Just watch the games and say who it reminds you of.
You're gonna compare a nose tackle to like Mad Max Fury Road or some shit like that, aren't you?
I did compare Luke Cafferty to someone, the guy from Friday Night Lights, who's like in the later seasons. Man, I forget. I think it was like Brock Bowers. I said was like Dwight Clark with a hint of Luke Cafferty or whatever his name is.
Luke McCaffrey is one of the football players at the fictional college in 22 Jump Street. There's my niche. Not Channing Tatum. Not Channing Tatum.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't mean to cut you off earlier. Were you gonna go into some?
No, C minus. C minus. That's,
okay.
That's
All right.
And for the record, I definitely have given out like D's and F's before. Like, I'm sorry, when the Rayshawn signing happened, I thought that was like a D.
Yeah, I was gonna say like this signing makes more sense than the Rayshawn signing did at the time. Because like I like when Rayshawn got signed, I was like, he was a team captain. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. And like just some of the other signings that they've made over the years, like I don't think this is one of the worst ones, even if it's maybe the most questionable one right now. All right, so moving on.
Yeah.
I thought the best value that they got, Ronald Darby. 2 years, $8.5 million, around $5 million. I think it's $5.5 million guaranteed. I really liked the Darby signing, and I've also gotten to the point where I'm like questioning if fans like are thinking they just paid a guy $50 million to be like a number one cornerback. Because I remember I mocked like Kool-Aid McKinstry to them a few days ago, and some people was like, "You don't think Darby starts?" Well, I mean, maybe he does, but he wouldn't be the most expensive backup cornerback in the NFL if he didn't.
Right. That's literally what it was last year.
Exactly. Realistically, he's not getting paid really anything at all. Like it could even be, I think, a 1-year deal. There's not a lot of dead cap on it if they got out of it after this year. To me, what the signing was, he's 30 years old. I think he turns 31 during the season. You're basically replacing him and Darius Williams. And if you look at it like in a vacuum, I think most teams would obviously prefer Darius Williams, like if you're playing like Madden or something. But like for the Jaguar specific scheme, Ronald Darby's a better fit. He's a better player for what they're doing, and I think over 2 years his contract value is less than what Darius would have cost them this last year alone. So basically the same age, but he's a better fit. I don't think there's as much upside as you would get out of like Darius, again in a vacuum, not Darius in this specific scheme, because Darby doesn't have a lot of ball production in his career. But I think that's just the kind of player that he is. He is a solid outside cornerback, really efficient in press coverage. We've seen some of the metrics. I thought it was one of the best moves that they made, and maybe one of the best value moves, Balky, honestly. Like, probably, I think the best value signing they've made since Arden Key.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good comparison of just like a veteran defender who will have like not a massive impact, like not even like that Darius Williams had last year is like arguably, I guess, the second best defender on the team after Josh Allen. But yeah, I thought I was a little skeptical that Williams was going to be let go. Like that's kind of the reason I was brainstorming the Marshawn Lattimore trade, is because I thought like a move would have to come like pretty much the same day, because I didn't think that the Jags would want to like cut Williams and then have their cornerback depth chart be like Tyson Campbell and a bunch of jabronis. But so credit to them for like ending up being able to go get Ronald Darby and sign him in the first couple of days. He was a guy that, I mean, because of his age, wasn't necessarily like the best cornerback on the market, but I thought he was the best fit for the market because like I knew that the Jags would be able to sign him to like a relatively cheap deal because of his age. And then, like, just because of the scheme fit, like, he was probably, like, the guy that I had at the top of my radar and, like, the top of my free agency list in terms of corners because, like, I saw the same metrics that you did, and they were from, like I saw, like, some metrics from PFF, some metrics from Sports Info Solutions, but they were all, like, press man coverage metrics from last season, and Darby did really well. Like I kinda said a couple seconds ago, he was a backup last year in Baltimore because they signed Rocky Sin, and then they have Marlon Humphrey, and like they had a couple injuries, and so I don't know if Darby was on the roster the whole time or if they just signed him off the street during the season. But either way, he ended up just kind of like coming in and being a nice role player for the Ravens defense last year, and so I think that's exactly what he can be for the Jaguars. This was definitely my favorite move they made in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, like if they had to roll out the ball and play a game today, like he could start, across from
Yeah,
Tyson Campbell. And I think that's the big thing is he gives you flexibility at position. Like it's no longer a worst case scenario if you don't get a corner at 17, because at the very least you have a second guy who's able to be a starter. When they released Darius Williams, they did not have a second starting cornerback. I hate to tell the Buster Brown and Craig Jr. fan clubs, but even with the addition of Darby, they still have one of the worst cornerback rooms in the NFL right now, right? It's got to be, if not bottom 5, it's got to be like bottom 8, bottom 10, because you have a young guy in Tyson Campbell who battled injuries last year, but I wouldn't question anybody who's, iffy about his fit in Ryan Nielsen's defense. So maybe a question mark there. You have an older Ronald Darby who he could be a solid starting cornerback, but that's what he is. He's a solid starting corner. He's not going to go against Justin Jefferson next week and completely, clamp him up. And then
right.
to me, you have a couple guys who are either total question marks because they haven't played at all, like Greg Jr. or like Christian Bradswell, or you have somebody who tops out to me as a like number 4 corner on your roster in Buster Brown. And frankly, I'm not even sure Buster Brown fits the scheme, to be honest with you. It wouldn't surprise me if potentially he gets beat out by some guys in training camp just because, he's, not a true fit. So I like the Darby signing, but their cornerback room went from like worst in the NFL to now one of the worst in the NFL.
Yeah.
So like to me, like there's still obvious work to do there. So I still think corner is their biggest like need. Like cornerback is as big of a need now as I thought it was before they released, Darius Williams. It's literally the same thing. They just swapped out Darby for Darius Williams. So I still think it's a massive need even with Darby, but I do think Darby is a step in the right direction toward filling that need.
Mm-hmm. And I think like we've gone over this, especially you, how like the plan for the Jaguars when they drafted Campbell in his rookie year was starting him out on the inside and then maybe having him transition outside, and that process had to be sped up a little bit just by the way that not just Campbell was playing the slot, but the way the whole defense was playing during that season. And then like I think that's something that we can maybe expect this year again, especially after we kind of went over how Savage and Antonio Johnson are both just safeties, and like it's not like Antonio Johnson is just like never going to see the field unless an injury happens. Like I think he could still appear in like 3 safety sets and dime personnel and stuff like that, and get like 10 to 20% of defensive snaps, even if he doesn't start. But I think it makes a lot of sense whether the Jaguars end up picking a cornerback at 17th overall or 116th overall or somewhere in between there to maybe like start him out inside for the first year, since you have outside guys already in Darby and Campbell, but then hypothetically he'll be a long-term outside starting corner.
Yeah, and like some of these guys you can potentially even, play in the slot early on, and have Darby, starting outside. Like, because,
Right.
I mean, we just saw what Teron Johnson got in Buffalo. Like, nickel corners are starting players now. I feel like we made the same argument with Deion Branch last year when people were telling us you can't take a nickel in the first. Well, you can. They're starting players, especially when the long-term plan is, like, to play them outside. I think, like, Terron Arnold, for example, he's one of the guys with the most slot experience in this class. Like out of the first round guys, if you want to talk about somebody who can play slot as a rookie and then move outside later in their rookie year or in year 2, I think he's the one that makes the most sense. I think like Tyson Campbell, Ronald Darby, and Terry Arnold is a good starting trio. You need to add to the depth, but I feel like that compared to last year's starting trio, I probably would lean toward the newer one.
Yeah, I think so too. It'd be like definitely a better blend of just like high end talent with depth rather than just having a bunch of mid without a lot of high end talent or depth. So
I think they're taking a corner at 17, Gus.
yeah,
I'll say right here, I will not mock them a receiver this entire offseason.
I'm with you there. I think the wide receiver hype has gone like a little bit out of control. I would be like, obviously, there's some like rumors or reports or whatever that they have an interest in trading up for Roma Dunze if he falls, but I don't think that's a realistic scenario at all. And I don't think even like taking like Brian Thomas or AD Mitchell is very realistic at 17. I think they have 3 to 4 cornerback names that they really like at 17. And the only reason that they're going to like not take just like the highest cornerback on their board is if a really good trench player falls and they're just like, oh, best player available. We can't not take Dallas Turner if he happens to get to 17,
That's fair. Like, just looking at some of these teams. Okay, so Chicago obviously going quarterback. Washington's going quarterback.
Yeah.
New England's either going quarterback or trading out. Arizona is, I'd assume, going receiver because they have the second worst.
Marvin Harrison. Just stop overthinking it. The Cardinals are taking Marvin Harrison.
The Chargers are either going to go receiver or an offensive tackle because Jim Harbaugh believes in establishing it. The Giants. Yeah. The Giants, I'm assuming, would go wide receiver. Like they took a cornerback in the first last year, and they're like, as much as I like this cornerback class, there's not a cornerback like to take at 6, overall.
Yeah, I think the Giants like maybe will take a quarterback, but I would just expect them to take the top receiver off the board. I think
Tennessee's obviously taking a left tackle. Like they kind of telegraphed that after releasing Andre Dillard the other day. Exactly. Atlanta seems like an obvious team to go for like the top edge on the board because they filled receiver and quarterback. Chicago, they're not going corner. They took one in the second last year, just paid Jalen Johnson. Right. The Jets aren't taking a corner. They have one of the best like corner trios in the NFL.
Yeah.
Minnesota is oddly, it seems like their fans are all in on JJ McCarthy. So let's just assume they're going to take a quarterback of some sort. Denver, maybe they take a corner, but I mean, Jared Stidham and Ben DiNucci are their quarterbacks right now. So they kind of seem like one of those teams that's going to take a terrible quarterback. Las Vegas, I don't think they're taking a corner. They don't have a starting right tackle. So I think they're probably taking one of these tackles. New Orleans also don't have a starting offensive tackle. Colts, the first team, I can like them and Denver are the teams I can think of maybe taking a corner. Yeah. Seattle's not taking a corner. So realistically, one of Kenyon Mitchell, Terry Arnold, or Kool-Aid McKinstry, in my opinion, are a lock to be there at 17. And I think the Jaguars will take one of them.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I don't know who else is taking a corner.
Yeah, and even like the Colts, I feel like they could really like Andrew Wiggins or Cooper DeJean like a lot more than a lot of other teams in this class or in this draft because of Gus Bradley's like cover 3 zone system. Those 2 guys like kind of like make more sense for Gus Bradley's scheme, whereas the 3 guys that you mentioned, Quinion, Kool-Aid, and Terrion Arnold, are better fits for like press man coverage or just man coverage in general under Nielsen.
Yeah, I think Cooper or Mitchell. I think Mitchell played a lot of off coverage at Toledo. Like I think he has every trait you could want out of a guy like playing press. But I could see I think Cooper DeJean or Kenyon will be a Jaguar. So regardless, I think the Jaguars will be able to find like a corner. It's like I don't think there's gonna be like a run on cornerbacks or anything like that. So that's my prediction. I'm sticking to my guns on that one. I think the Jags are taking a corner at 17, even after signing Ronald Darby. Ronald Darby for peanuts. So that's my take on that.
That's fair. I definitely love the no wide receiver take too. I think that's a good one to have. Yeah. All right, Ronald Darby got an initial grade of an A from me. What about you?
I give it a B+.
Come on, you're no fun.
Can you give an A to like a minor deal like that?
I guess I gave it an A because like I said, like I was thinking about Darby before, and he was kind of like quote unquote my guy in free agency.
He was. It was a good call.
So yeah, when he ended up actually signing with the Jags, that made me happy.
We know why else you gave it an A. You're on the payroll.
Well, I was gonna say when we were talking about when you were talking about like D or F signings earlier, I was thinking about saying something about Mac because I gave him a C on the website, but that's mostly because he's from Jacksonville. I don't know what it would have been lower.
Yeah, don't criticize the Mac Jones trade. People did not react to it well. So
yeah, all right.
Even if Justin Fields was had for the same price, nonetheless.
Oh,
we'll move on from that. All right, we're gonna break real quick, and then we'll get into the rest of these signings and talk about everybody's favorite Tennessee Titans wide receiver. All right, so we'll be right back. All right, Gus, we're back. We're locked. We're loaded. Let's get into everybody's favorite free agency edition, a special teamer. Devin Duvernay is the next one. 2 years. I think he got like 8.5 or 8.8 million. He got like basically Ronald Darby's contract, but with like an extra like 0.2 million in guaranteed money.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it.
Yeah. But my read on it was literally just he's replacing Jamal Agnew. He's maybe a slightly worse returner, but he's probably a much better offensive player. And that's other than I don't get paying returners at least as often as they do. Like this is like now the second time in 4 years that they've gone out of their way to pay a returner. I personally, and it's literally just my philosophy. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's not a position I think it makes sense to pay. I mean, maybe with the new kickoff rules, maybe, but you also Deonis Johnson and Parker Washington on the roster. You didn't have to allocate cap, to there. So that I guess was my biggest knock. But he is I'd say a significantly better receiver than Agnew. I mean, he played receiver in college, which is going for him.
Yeah. No, like kick returner is kind of like what we were talking about with safety, where like it just kind of like makes so much more sense financially to draft a guy in the 6th or 7th round, or even draft a guy in the 6th or 7th round, and then like I don't know, sign a Deontay Harty from the Buffalo Bills, who's like a pretty good returner for the Saints like a year or 3 ago, and so like I don't know, I definitely understand that point on perspective of it, but I'm also not opposed to them like making sure they like went out and got a Jamal Agnew replacement, because I feel like Parker Washington was probably like drafted to like be the Agnew replacement, kind of like Antonio Johnson was drafted to be the Rayshon Jenkins replacement. But yeah, the Jaguars I guess didn't really have enough confidence, so they went out and got Duvernay. I do think, as you said, he's definitely a better receiver coming into Jacksonville than Jamal Agnew was, because Agnew, I think he was actually like a cornerback or defensive back / return man in college. And then when he was in the league, he started transitioning to receiver. Yeah. And so he was still learning the position when he showed up for the Jaguars. And it's not the case for Duvernay. So Duvernay is definitely a much more capable, like kind of backup wide receiver / gadget wide receiver / line up in the slot against Gus Bradley's linebackers twice a game and just go long and try to beat them.
And he's obviously got a ton of speed. He can be like that big play at a random moment, like type guy, like Agnew was. Like I said, I feel like anybody like even mentioning him when it comes like to the receiver room and stuff, it's like a bit like too much. Like he'll be used, I guess, to an extent there, but that's more or less where I come down on it. Maybe you get only slightly less in the return game as opposed to much less, and you're a little bit better in terms of receiver depth. And also, Agnew's dealt with a lot of injuries the last couple seasons. Duvernay is probably a more consistent guy in that regard. But I don't know. My biggest takeaway was just that they love paying return man.
It's funny. It's a great bet.
I can't remember the last time they did it before Agnew, and now they've done it 2 times in 4 years.
When Agnew happened, I kind of like assumed it was like just a weird Urban Meyer move, or because he was like talking nonstop about speed when he first got in there, and so I was like, oh, Agnew's pretty fast. Like maybe I don't even know. I just kind of thought it was like an urban type move, but I guess
Yeah.
it might be more of a balky thing now that's happened twice in the past 4 years. But I mean, like I'm with you where like I don't think Duvernay is as good of a returner, but at the same time, like he had an All Pro in 2021 and back.
He's still really,
he's still
yeah,
very
yeah. He's still a really good returner. His averages are really good. Like he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns, but he's still like one of the better like returners in the
yeah.
NFL. Yeah. So I'm with you on that one. I gave it a C minus. You can probably give it a C, I think. And literally, my biggest knock on it is just I don't get paying returners, but it's not a move that like even like I'm looking, I'm like just shrugging my shoulders at it. Like it's not a move I'm going to spend an iota of minutes.
Yeah, I gave it a B minus because I thought it was
You
either
would.
a B or like I thought it was even higher than that, but just like similar to what you're saying, it's like not enough of a needle mover to give it a higher grade than that. So I still think I'd say it's above average.
I'll give you that. All right. Your guy, Joey Sly. Is it Sly?
No.
Is it Sly or Sile? I don't know.
Let's just go with Sly because that's more fun.
I have to look it up now.
Joey, the other one. It's never
Sly name pronunciation. It's an ad. Dang it. Okay. we're never gonna know.
I mean,
We're never.
We're never.
Yeah. I mean, the fact I signed him to a 1-year deal as opposed to the 3-year deal they were trying to sign Will Lutz to reportedly, kind of says it all, right? Like I think he's simply just going to compete with Riley Patterson in training camp and the offseason, and we'll see where they go from there. I do not think he should be considered a lock to be the starter at all. I think their plan was always to get another kicker. I think there's a good argument to make that Brandon McManus is better than both him and Riley Patterson. But, I mean, you could read the tea leaves at Doug Peterson's press conferences last year. Like, he obviously wasn't very fond of McManus's, performance. I think literally the only takeaway of substance I have is that this means they will not draft a kicker, which I think is a good thing. I mean, the top kickers are going like 4th, 5th round now, and they cannot.
Yeah, that would be ridiculous.
Yeah, so
I was thinking that like if they spend on a 6th or 7th rounder on a kicker, like I wouldn't be mad at all.
I think adding like a 6th linebacker is legitimately better than drafting a kicker.
Okay, I don't care.
If the kicker stinks, that hurts your team more than that linebacker stinks.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Now you turn into like a good thing.
Because you're drafting a starter if you draft one.
If you draft a linebacker or if you draft
if you draft a kicker, yeah, he's starting if you draft a kicker. So you have to be right on that eval, at least in my opinion.
Okay. I kind of thought that if you draft a 7th round kicker, he doesn't have to be a lock for the roster. But I get what you're saying. I still think it makes sense to like, I don't know. Joey is like, he has a few years of experience. He hit a career long 61-yarder for the Panthers. But actually, I think it was this past season. He set the franchise record for Carolina with a 61-yard boot. But he's like, I don't think he's as good as McManus or Lutz or maybe even Patterson. So I think that's kind of why I'm like, I wouldn't be opposed to adding like a super late round or even just undrafted kicker.
I mean, he played for Washington last year, so like I said, shows you where he is on the radar. Yeah, it's a nothing burger to me. I don't think Balky's ever drafted a kicker.
Yeah,
I
have to do that. I'm going to try to get into that next week. I think is like looking back at like Balky's tendencies and stuff.
I do not think he will ever take one in his career as a general manager. Put that down as a hot take for me.
Okay.
just so I can say I was right when he retires.
Okay. This is the first pod we've done where I didn't have the doc pulled up already. All right, Balky will never draft a kicker.
Yeah.
In his career.
Underline it. Good.
All right.
The kicker market got Balky ball, buddy.
That's a good one. I like that one. What's gonna happen? What's gonna happen when I like look back at his previous drafts in a week and see that he drafted one in the 7th round in 2017?
I'll say I was misinformed by somebody on Twitter.
All right.
I gave it a C minus, which to me a C minus is the equivalent of me shrugging at it. Like I do not care about the Joey's like
I
criticizing.
gave it a C plus, which is the same. Like I was just being a homer, I guess, by
Yeah,
saying C
yeah,
plus.
that
That like
puppet tax. Yeah, that puppet tax is like a full half letter grade, huh?
I guess so. So yeah,
Yeah.
either way, it rounds out to a C. It's yeah, it's
All right.
something. It's a thing.
Is it Trevis? Trevis Gibson? All right, let's go with that. Was the last one, signed him on the same day they signed Joey Sly. I think I gave it a B. Like, to me, if you're signing him to be your edge three, I'm raising my eyebrows at that. But I think he's like an ideal edge four. He's young, lots of physical upside. He had 10 sacks in 2 years, like in a 2 year span with Chicago. One of those years, he got 7 sacks. He played under Bill Shuey, the outside linebackers coach in Chicago. So Shuey obviously knows him. And like he's better edge depth than they had at any point in 2023. Like sack him up against either Caleb on Chason or Smoot coming off an Achilles injury. He's better edge depth than they had at any time then. I wouldn't like lock him into like a role or anything like that because he likely got a 1 year really tiny deal. He still obviously has to perform in training camp to even make the roster, etc. But I thought it was a good signing. You don't find a lot of like edge guys with upside in free agency because most guys don't like good edge players leave. He didn't play at all really with Tennessee last year. He was a healthy scratch, I think, for like 9 games. I have no idea why, but
Yeah,
he didn't do really anything there. So I am interested about the fit because the big thing was in Chicago. Why Chicago moved on was he didn't really fit Eberflus's 4-3 front.
mm.
And he was seen more, I think, as like a 3-4 stand-up guy. And now he's, coming to Jacksonville where it seems like they're kind of moving away from that. But I don't know. I think he's an interesting guy, and he's better edge depth than they had at any point last year. I think you still have to add to the position. You can't have him and Yasir Abdullah and DJ Coleman be your edge depth entering week one. But I think, like, say if you add either Bud Dupree or like a rookie in the top 100 picks, that like group is much better than what they had a year ago.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely agree that like he's better than any kind of depth that they've had recently, and obviously the Bill Shuey connection is a good one to have. It almost gets like an incomplete grade for me though, because I mean you helped explain why he kind of like ran out of playing time in Chicago, but it was weird because he didn't really do it much as a rookie, but then in his second and third years he was like really coming along as a rotational pass rusher, and then his last year in Chicago it just kind of like he almost seemed to like fall off a map, and I just didn't really understand why. And then he, like you said, he was in Tennessee last year and like barely played, and so I don't know if that was because there just happened to be better players in front of him on the depth chart, or because it wasn't a good on-field fit, or if there was off-field stuff. Like I just don't know. So that was like I don't know. I was questioning that a little bit, but it's definitely a huge edge 4 upgrade, and even edge 3 if that's what it ends up being. But like ideally not.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a good sign. Like I said, I gave it a B. I think it's
I gave it a B
yeah.
too. Is that the
Hey,
first?
there we go.
All right, nice.
There we go. Yeah. Not like a pure needle mover, but in terms of needle movers, the biggest deal that they made, I think it's the best free agency signing Trent Baalke's ever made. Or Eric, is it Eric Armstead? Dude, that's gonna kick my ass. Yeah, okay. Eric Armstead, 3 years. He got like 14.5 million per year, like 28 million guaranteed. He's 15th among defensive tackles in average annual value. I think he's like probably like like a top 10 to 12 defensive tackle, like as a whole. I'd say he's a top 10 pass rushing defensive tackle. He just came off a killer year as a pass rusher. I don't think the Jaguars have added a talent like him since Calais Campbell in 2017. And I'm including the guys they signed in 2022. I think Armstead today is a better player than, Kirk, Oluwakan, Ingram, etc. when they signed them then. I say I don't know if I call him a blue chip, but he's like blue chip adjacent. Like,
Yeah, I was
it's
wondering that too. I was like, where would I put him in between like blue chip versus like Pro Bowl caliber?
he's probably like right in that middle. Like that's simply like because of like he's going to turn 31, I think, in November. He's been in the NFL for 9 years. Like if this move was like 4 years ago, then he's obviously like blue chipper. But I thought it was a brilliant addition, and I know I don't say that about many of their additions, but I give it an A+. I have literally no negatives to say about it. I know he's dealt with some injuries the last 2 years, but he's not what I would call like an injury riddled player. Like it's been like very different types of injuries. It's not like one like specific thing. And then he played through those like that meniscus thing in the playoffs last year and recorded a sack in the Super Bowl. I
Right.
think he's like tied for 15th all time in playoff sacks with 8. So he has playoff production. He doesn't have like crazy sack numbers, but in terms of like pressures and win rate, he's consistently like high ceiling, high floor. Are you trying to figure out how to say his name?
Yeah, I've been looking at it for like 2 minutes.
Yeah. So to me, it's the exact same thing as signing Calais Campbell in 2017. You're getting a really high floor, high upside guy who can be one of the best interior pass rushers in the NFL. It fills a massive need. They haven't had a player like him in years. Like, and like Ryan Nielsen as a defensive line guy, he's probably like over the moon, having him, Josh Allen, and then a young guy in Trayvon Walker. I think Armstead can both benefit both Allen and Walker and also can benefit a lot from them too, because we saw last year how many times quarterbacks were stepping up in the pocket because of Allen and Walker. I think that can make for some easy production for Armstead, and he can also obviously make their jobs easier. I have nothing negative. Look, I'll take that back. The one negative I have to say is they're getting a little too dipping their toes in the void year pool. That's the only thing I'll say. Like for anybody that says Shad Khan doesn't spend, like they will have $12.5 million on the books for Eric Armstead in a year where he is not currently projected to be on the team. So that's my only knock, I'd say, is they're probably getting a little too voidy with some of these deals. But otherwise, I have nothing to say about bad to say about it. I think it is a home run. Trent Bulky balled me. He bulky balled you. He bulky balled the Houston Texans. Yeah. And what was it that Houston? Like he was almost a Houston Texan too. So I think people need to factor that.
It's straight up for Malik Collins.
Yeah,
which I feel like I hadn't heard Malik Collins' name in like 2 years.
No, at all. So you obviously, I think, need to factor that in. Like competing team wanted him, So I think just in terms of like the arm race of the AFC South, this was a move they needed to make because you're seeing Danielle Hunter get added. You're seeing Calvin Ridley get added. They need to make a splash. So A+, no notes, 10 out of 10.
No, they definitely need to make a splash. I gave it an A, and it was only like I docked it from an A+ to an A only because of the injuries. But with that said, like I totally agree with you where it's not a case where he's injury prone and like he played through a lot of those injuries and there were different ones. And so like I'm not really concerned about that. It's just that like because there's been multiple injuries in the past 2 years and he's 30 or 31 years old right now. Figured out dock it a half of a letter grade. But yeah, I'm with you in terms of both like on the field fit for like helping out his like fellow pass rushers and then off the field fit too. Like he has 4 consecutive watch paid man of the year nominations from the Niners. And so he's definitely got that like, I forget the right word for it, but he's going to be great for the community, which is always good. And yeah, I'm with you where like it felt like they needed a splash. And like, I will say, I don't think it was necessarily like a Ridley or Armstead situation for the Jaguars. I do think there's like worlds where they could have like had both on their roster going into 2024. Like I think I heard definitely from one like reliable person, but I think too that like they were like planning on going after Armstead kind of regardless.
Yeah, it absolutely wasn't a they pivoted to Armstead giving Ridley's money. Masterful gambit, sir.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that's clear. But again, I agree with you where like I felt like they really needed to like make a big move, make a big splash, like get some like real star power onto the roster. Because as soon as they lost Ridley, and then like they're in contract negotiations with their best player, and they need to sign an extension either this offseason or next with their next best player. So it's like I don't know, Ridley went out the door, and then like, not that I don't think like Lawrence and Allen aren't going to be Jaguars in the long term, but they're just like contract situations are a limbo, and so it's like you need to like make sure there's like star power on this roster at some point because like you
Yeah.
can with like good enough for talent and good enough coaching and good enough luck, like you can get through the regular season, but then like you're just not really going to have a hope in the playoffs. And so I think this was the like just needle moving move that they needed to make of like not just like winning more games in the regular season, but specifically winning more games in the postseason. I think this one signing is going to make a big impact.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think like just in terms of like small picture, I think it's one of like the biggest needle movers like they've made. And I also think it shows like the needed aggressiveness, I think, like to realize that they very easily could have said, we're paying Ward Robson Harrison, Devon Hamilton. We're not going to go after, another defensive tackle. I'm interested to see who starts across from him. I think it's got to be Devon, right? Like if he's healthy, right? And I don't know, Will Robson Harris is like a backup 3 technique. I'd say probably like their third down package right now would be Trayvon, Josh on the edge, and then Roy and Armstead in the middle. I mean, you can do a lot worse than that, I think.
For sure. I feel like do they have another like nose tackle on the roster? I mean, they signed Jeremiah Ledbetter to like a futures contract or something, I think. But like I feel like Tyler Lacey, Armstead, like I guess Gotsis could play inside probably a little bit more, but like Roy Robertson Harris, like I feel like they have a lot of like more so 3 and 5 techniques than 0 and 1 techniques. And so like I almost feel like even if Devon Hamilton isn't 100% healthy by the start of next season, as long as he's healthy enough, like I think that makes the most sense is for him to start next to Armstead and at least like 4-man down fronts.
Devontae Sweat at 17. Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
After the Jordan Davis pick,
is that what you're saying?
I thought Jordan Davis was an awesome pick for the Birds a couple of years ago, but yeah, exactly.
There's a very real scenario where Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith are both useless NFL players.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And then the linebacker, Nakobe Dean, right?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
It's weird that Carter is just like the only good bulldog for them.
Yeah, pretty much. I'll take that back. They dang, who's the corner I really like? Keely Ringo.
Was he good though?
Yeah, he was solid as a spot starter last year.
Okay, I just didn't really hear about him. I mean, I knew it was like on paper like the steal of the draft.
I was invested, so I saw that out.
There you go. Was he like one of your, not necessarily one of your guys, but did you just like him last?
He was one of my guys. I loved Ringo. Yeah, he was definitely one of my guys. Him falling to the 5th tells me maybe he's a little unwell, or maybe there's some injury concerns there. But I was
yeah. When it's like that much of a fall, I feel like it's got to be injury related,
or
just there's something.
All right, last topic we'll get to. Calvin Ridley leaving for the Tennessee Titans. Obviously signed a massive deal. I think it was 4 years, $92 million with $50 million guaranteed. Got like a ton of guaranteed money. The things I'll say on this are, one, anybody like presuming the Jaguars weren't seriously trying to retain him is like living in a fantasy land. Like Albert Breer reported that they were offering him roughly, $20 million per year, which, you compare that to the Patriots offering $22 million per year, you factor in taxes. That's a better deal than the Patriots offered him. The Titans offered him crazy money, and I would assume significantly higher guarantees than the Jaguars were. So, excuse me. I personally would not have paid Ridley what he got, but I don't think the Jaguars won by any means. Like, I feel like the Jaguars lost because you just lost arguably your second most talented player on offense after Trevor Lawrence. Because like I saw like a fan have a tweet the other day. It was like rank like these options, and it was like T. Higgins, Ayuk, Brian Thomas Jr., Adonai Mitchell, and Calvin Ridley. And like literally every Jags fan was like listing Ridley as like last. I'm like, no, he's you hope Brian Thomas can be as good as Calvin Ridley one day. Yeah, no. So I don't think anybody should minimize the fact that they lost a legitimate top 15 receiver. Like he's getting paid like
We can
yeah.
say
They lost like a Pro Bowl caliber talent, and they did not replace him with a Pro Bowl caliber talent. So I think that needs to be factored in. And I don't know, they just kind of look stupid, like the whole you have to wait until 4:00 and then somebody else signs them anyways. Like
that.
it just made them look dumb. And at the end of the year, at the end of the day, they gave up a 3rd and a 5th round pick for a 1-year rental in a year they didn't make the playoffs. I mean, that's just not very good return on investment. Everybody, I think, when they made that trade, including the Jaguars, was assuming he'd be here for several seasons, not just one. So I wouldn't have paid him. I get why they didn't match that offer, but I also think they came out as losers in this. I don't think he really moves the needle for Tennessee. Like I still don't think they're going to be competitive for a bit. So I think like literally the only person who won in this is Calvin Ridley, which but more power to him. I mean
Good for Calvin Ridley.
He's never going to get a chance to sign a deal like that again.
Yeah,
like he should not care that Will Levis is his quarterback. He got it back. Dude, that's all that matters.
No, I'm really rooting for him. I feel like it's been like a roller coaster of 2 years, but really in the past year of like the Jaguars' fan experience with Calvin Ridley, like just like up and down. So many emotions, so many literal up and downs. But I mean, I feel like he's still kind of like out to prove to people like how good he really is. And so I'm hoping he's able to do that in Tennessee. And then obviously, like you said, like this is his best and maybe only chance to really cash in and get like generational wealth. Like he grew up in not the greatest circumstances. And so I'm sure that he's made a little bit of money to this point, but this is different. And so hats off to him. Like, so for him, he's definitely like the clear winner. So I'm like, from the Jags perspective, like, should they have just extended him early and gave up the 2nd rounder? Like,
I don't think so. I personally, I don't think so. I don't think that giving up a top 50 pick and having to pay top of the market is like a good move. Because I mean, if it wasn't for the Titans throwing a crazy deal that nobody else in the NFL offered him, he'd still be a Jaguar. Like I firmly believe he would have taken the Jags offer over the Patriots. I firmly believe the Titans got involved pretty late into things, because literally every NFL reporter was saying he's expected to be back in Jags. That's not by accident. Cameron Wolfe and Jonathan Jones, 2 guys I respect a ton professionally, 2 guys who are super locked into Jags. More or less, we're saying the same things for hours. I think that's what was happening. I think that until the Titans came late into the thing, he was still going to be a Jaguar, and it was going to be a masterful gambit, But
I mean, that was always the risk, though. Like,
yeah, it was.
Literally, like, wrote the article about like how like this is their plan and there is risk involved, even if it did happen at the last hour. And so, like, maybe this take is like not correct, but like I just am wondering now in hindsight, like if they had been able to get Ridley to like 19 million a year with like half of the amount of guaranteed money that he got, and like had signed him up for that, and had just had to like move back in the draft 30 spots, like is that really that big of a deal?
Here's my question: if you're Ridley and his agent, why would you take that? Why wouldn't you wait until free agency?
Yeah, it's fair.
To me, their mistake was laughing about the fact that they haven't started contract negotiations with Josh Allen yet and started them so late. To me, start those negotiations earlier so you can save the tag and use it on Ridley, because then at the very least you have Ridley for your must-win year. He's earning less in terms of average annual value than he is on his new deal. That to me was the misstep. Was you had 2 players you couldn't really afford to hit the market, so try to make sure you don't lose them by extending one of them early. And obviously that didn't happen, and like they're not going to get a comp pick for Ridley either. That's the other thing. Like they've been way too active in free agency, and I firmly believe that they're not going to get like enough guys signed to get any kind of comp pick. So you're not getting a pick for that anyways. So to me is like they kind of screwed themselves the second they franchise tag Josh Allen, I think.
Yeah, and like to play devil's advocate for them, like there's also a chance that like Josh Allen wanted to reach the open market because like especially like with the Danielle Hunter deal last week, like I know that it's a little bit different because Hunter's like kind of like at the very end of his prime, and he's 30 or 31 years old, and he just signed a 2-year deal. But like 48 out of the $49 million that he signed on for are guaranteed, which is crazy. So it'd be like obviously it's not like every edge rusher deal is going to have a ton of guarantees from here on out, but like hypothetically, like Allen's camp could point to that and be like, oh, this really productive guy got a lot of guaranteed money.
Yeah.
And point to, I don't know. I feel like the Vikings gave Jonathan Grenard a lot of money and say like, hey,
Brian
Jonathan's
Burns.
more productive than yeah. So
I wonder if the Jags had approached Allen's camp in October when Montez Sweat and Rashawn Gary were getting paid, if they would have thought that.
see,
That's
I
my
think
thing.
that's like I was just saying like
I
I
agree with
feel
you.
like they should have started negotiations earlier. I was like, oh, if they actually did start negotiations at the NFL Combine, then like it makes sense if Josh Allen's camp was like, nah, y'all waited this long to talk to us. Like, let's wait until a month from now when we can see like how all this new money affects things.
I agree with you because
But
that
yeah,
money's still going
at
to
the
be
end of the
green.
day, they should have started the negotiations like in the summer and like or in the season so that they could have tagged Ridley. That was always like what should have happened.
Are they like losers for Brian Burns getting paid before Josh Allen? Because I feel like that pretty much sets Josh Allen to make nearly $30 million a year. Like now that his camp can point to what Burns. Cause I think Burns has one more sack than Allen in their careers, but most guys are getting paid off what did you just do, and Allen obviously just had a crazy season. So I I, I don't know, just the timing on a lot of things has just been off to me, and it's been more about like I think like pride and stuff than actual. This is the smart way to build a football team, but I don't know.
That's what I'm
I
saying
did
with the Calvin thing. Like it's like I know that might not technically be right, but like I'm just saying like just swallow your pride and like pay the guy an extra couple million to keep him in town. Like at the end of the day, like just pay good players. Like there's been like I feel like almost backlash and during free agency that I saw like, oh, why did the Giants pay Brian Burns so much? And like why did the Raiders pay Christian Wilkins so much? Like it doesn't fit their like contending windows. It's like why do you care this much? Just like get good players in the building and keep them there.
exactly. I feel like Balky said that at the combine. It might have been the Frangie interview. He was like, "Somebody's a good player. We want to keep good players," stuff
Yeah.
like that. Well, you didn't. So I don't know. I'm not going to criticize them for not paying him that much, but I will criticize them for how the whole process, played out. And I don't know. I think like from Ridley's perspective, I completely understand, why he took the Titans deal, but I still contend that he was this close to returning as a Jaguar. And we'll see how they address, the position, now, because I don't think you can just swap in Gabe Davis with Calvin Ridley and say, we're done. But I do kind of get the feeling that internally they'd probably make the argument that we spread the ball around. Evans basically a receiver. We have 4 quality, guys. On that note, me O'Brien, 1010, reported that the Jaguars were talking to the 49ers of Brandon Ayuk, etc., and that an offer of 17 and Zay Jones for Ayuk was denied by the Jaguars. I'm not going to get into like the details and the mud of that, but I will say, does it say anything to you that they were at least looking, like maybe kicking the tires on another soon to be expensive guys as potential one? Like, does that say to you that they know that they have a hole they need to fill?
I don't know because like you just said, like I feel like there's definitely circumstances where they just enter the 2024 season and they're like, we got Christian, Zay, Gabe, Engram. Like this is a good group that we can win with.
We made the playoffs with a group like this before, etc.
Right. Yeah. But no, I'm definitely encouraged that like there was reports out there about interest in Ayuk. Like even if an Ayuk deal doesn't happen, like I think it's good that they're trying to look for more because I feel like they're like I did today for 1010XL. I did like a tiers document where I ranked like every NFL pass catcher unit and I did 5 tiers and like the third middle one was mid and that's where I had the Jaguars because they have a bunch of like second to third level options like that are solid but like they just and they don't really have great depth behind them. And more than anything, they don't have like a superstar leading the way. Like that's
That,
what.
that that's the biggest thing to me. That with Ridley, you had a guy that defensive coordinators had to account for. A guy that I think it was clear defenses were afraid of. I think Christian Kirk's a really good football player. I think Evan Ingram's a really good football player. I don't think coordinators are like staying up at night game planning for them.
Yeah.
They don't have a guy to me that can strike fear into the heart of a defense.
I agree. And like we talked about this a ton last offseason, like since Ridley was joining the team for 2023, but like about the impact that we've seen like premier wide receivers have on young quarterbacks, from like the Tyreek to Miami trade to the Stephon Diggs to Buffalo trade to the AJ Brown to Philadelphia trade. And like, so it just would make a lot of sense to get a young premier receiver like Ayuk in a trade, even if you do have to give him a big extension. I think that would make a lot of sense. And so I feel like the most likely scenario is that the Jaguars take a wide receiver on day 2, and then like that kind of just like fills out the receiver room, and the rookie will hopefully have a high enough floor that he can like be a contributor, and then maybe even a high enough ceiling that he could be like the number one option within a year or two. But like definitely the more exciting and fun option would be like sending some kind of trade package for a Brandon Ayuk or a T. Higgins.
Yeah. And I also don't believe the Bengals are actually going to trade T.
Yeah.
Higgins. It definitely seems like their old owner is going to be grouchy and be like, no. So.
Yeah. I talked about this on the pod a couple episodes ago where like T was tagged so early that I thought it was kind of like a low-key warning shot off to the rest of the league that like this guy might be available if you give us enough. But maybe it's more so just about how that front office goes about their business.
Front offices are weird. Like they'll tag a guy like you said and like kind of imply that he's available, and then once that guy asks to be traded, then the tune starts changing. So
yeah.
All right, last topic. How does free agency impact to you what they do at number 17? Yeah, I already kind of made my case. I think they're going to take the top available cornerback at 17. I think free agency kind of made that clear. They're not taking a center, obviously. They're not taking a defensive tackle. Like they're just not going to take a defensive tackle. They're already paying so many guys. I don't think they're going to take a receiver. What else? What else they're going to take? I think corner is by far away their biggest need. That and obviously a number one receiver. But I feel like they can justify. Not that I agree with it. The receiver room more to themselves than they can justify the cornerback room. Maybe edge, but edge felt like an obvious like position to go early at last year, and they repeatedly didn't. So do we really think they see backup edge as that big of a thing? And we've talked about it before. Trent Baalke drafts like starters in the first round.
Yeah.
He doesn't draft like guys in the first round to sit. So I think they're taking a cornerback at 17. I think free agency kind of made it obvious. What about you?
Yeah, I think that was the big one. I think for me, it's that they're going to take a swing at receiver, and like fingers crossed, just from a fan perspective, that it's going to be on like an Ayuk or Higgins or an Odunze or someone like with a really big name that's exciting. But I think even if they like go for a day 2 guy, it's going to be more of like Xavier Legette from South Carolina, who's this like huge like AJ Brown type guy who's just like bigger and faster than everyone else, and he's a bit more raw. Like apparently he's been like kind of like just like learning the position kind of recently.
Yeah, he could, to me, he can end up as Laviska Shenault, or he can be DK Metcalf.
Right, and so I feel like they're gonna like, because they know that like the receiver room might need a little bit more juice at the top. Like I could see them swinging for kind of like a high upside prospect like Legette as opposed to
say it. Lad.
Yeah. Honestly, I was thinking about this the other day. I think I would love to see Lad and Teal. Lad at 48 overall. I think I would be a fan.
It'd be a good pick.
Because he's. I mean, everyone like archetypes him as like a slot white guy, but he can play outside too.
Dude, taking Lad at 48 to me is significantly better than taking Brian Thomas at 17.
Yeah,
I do not think Brian Thomas at 17 would be a good pick. I just to me, he's just not one of the 17 best players in the class. I mocked Leggett to them at 48 in my mock the other day, and I had several people asking if he'll even be there. I think he will be. He's old and has basically no production outside of last year. Like that seems like a second round prospect. Like I mean, DK Metcalf went like 60 something.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Leggett gets to like the top of the third. Honestly,
if Carolina takes him, it's over for him. For him,
he is. I mean, he went to South Carolina. He's like he's kind of a country boy. So
yeah. So I think we're both pretty much in agreement. Would you say you'd be surprised if they took a receiver at 17?
Yeah, and the main reason is like kind of like what you just said with Brian Thomas. Like I just don't really think there's one worth taking at that spot. Like obviously there's the top 3 receivers in the drafts in Harrison Jr., Neighbors, and Odunze, and those 3 are awesome. And if any of them fall, I would definitely be there for some kind of trade up. But like then after that, it's like your group of Brian Thomas, A.D. Mitchell, Keon Coleman, who like all seem like more so like picks that like to go 27th overall to like a team like the Chiefs or the Bills who just need like one more piece for a contending team. Or so like bottom of the first, top of the second seems like a much better landing spot for that like second tier of receivers than just straight up middle of the first round.
The worst potential pick they could make is Xavier Worthy. If they take it,
I agree with you.
Dude, imagine them taking Xavier Worthy at 17. It'd be what? Yeah. I'm imagining what I would say. I'm imagining how I would try to stop myself from saying it because I just think that'd be like people are asking for a receiver. Wait until they try to draft John Ross. I mean, it's a good bit because I'm with you. I don't think any there's like I think there are 3 receivers who should be top 10 picks, and then everybody else to me is a late first, early second round guys. And there's a lot of guys like that. That's why this receiver class is so good. There's a lot of guys who should go like in the second round. I don't think there's many that should go at 17. I'm with you. I will say, I think they go cornerback. What I would do if I was sitting in the big boy seat, I would make the Chris Olave trade for Roma Dunze if he got to like 9 or 10. That's what I personally do. I'd send that 3rd and 4th. I'd send the 3rd and 4th. Take a cornerback in the second round, and then a couple more cornerbacks in the 5th, 6th, and 7th, and call it a draft. That's what I personally would do.
I'm not even like the biggest personal fan of Odunze. It's not that I dislike him. I just don't like love him as much as some other people do. But like I would still be just so there for that. He's got such a like a high floor is like just like kind of doing wrong by him because it's like he's just such a great overall prospect, like the kind of guy that just doesn't even if he's not truly elite at a ton of stuff, he doesn't have any weaknesses in this game whatsoever.
I think he's a receiver too.
Yeah, I think I liked Neighbors a lot, but like now that we're like I don't know, I think that's fun take.
Neighbors is more athletic, obviously.
Yeah, it's just hard not to get like entranced by
I get it.
Neighbors.
I get it.
I mean, Harrison Jr. is definitely wide receiver 1 though. Like if you're like, there's been like reports that like some teams have Neighbors over Harrison Jr. as like their wide receiver 1, and I think that's like probably like 95% of those is like the team like already have like X receiver on their roster, so they're like, why would we draft Marvin Harrison? He just doesn't really fit our team. Like I don't think very many teams actually think that Neighbors is a better receiver prospect in general than Harrison Jr. because that's pretty asinine.
I'm bumping up Marvin Harrison Jr. on my board for not taking any part in the draft process.
It was legendary. That was awesome.
Dudes rock. Dudes rock. I mean, he has literally nothing to gain from it. So
he said, "Go look at my film, and then we'll talk."
Like the best thing has been people saying like he wouldn't be a top 5 pick if his last name wasn't Harrison. Jerry Rice's son is in this draft.
Right. And is Frank Gore's in this draft, or was he in the last draft? He's in this one.
Yeah.
I feel like there might be like one other one. Maybe not.
Jeremiah Trotter.
Oh yeah, good one. Good call. Yeah, I didn't love him either. I was looking over the linebackers for the draft guide that's coming out Monday for 1010 XL. Check it out. The linebackers I spent like 5 minutes on. I do like the Michigan kid. The Michigan kid is cool, but
The linebacker position has become so disgusting in college football, dude. It's hard to find. I feel like good linebackers in the draft anymore. Which curious about teams trading back up into the first. So like them nowadays.
I was gonna say I was listening to a pod with Nate Tice and Charles McDonald, and they said Roquan Smith was the last true linebacker drafted, and yeah, no arguments here.
No, 0. All right. You got anything else for us, my friend? I feel like this was plenty take filled. We'll be back with more draft specific takes and stuff, but I feel like in terms of free agency, I feel like we got a lot off our chest here.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if you think they're completely done with free agency, or if you thought they might make one more addition, like what position it would be at. My only thought was that like they obviously got Mitch Morse, which is a nice signing, and then they brought back Ezra Cleveland, Brandon Sheriff, still have Cam Robinson, re-signed Blake Hance. But offensive line, I think would be like the one position I'd say like maybe they'll like go out and get themselves a Cody Whitehair and just like get some depth there. But so do you think they're like completely done, or could you see like one more position being added?
I think they'll probably add somebody. Like they normally sign like free agents like late March, early April. So I could see them adding. Nobody significant though.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
You got one more in here. I can see it.
No, I'm trying to think of one because I don't have one in me.
Yeah. I got it. I feel like Armstead put their free agency like over the top. If they didn't sign Armstead, I'd have probably like
because like
since they did, I think it was a good thing.
Yeah, I think when you look at their free agency from like a zoomed in perspective, it was really good because they got Armstead, which is a big splash signing, and then with all their other moves, they were like kind of plugging in a lot of holes so that they didn't have to just pigeonhole one position when they got to 17th overall in 6 weeks. Yeah. But when you look at it like zoomed back, it's a lot less pretty because like then you look at how like Ridley got lost like pretty much because a Josh Allen deal hadn't been made, and like Ronald Darby is a good signing, but you also had to cut Darius Williams and didn't really have anyone you trusted like development-wise, like a Monteric Brown to just go out there and start. Same with Antonio Johnson. Like hypothetically, like that would have been a cheap guy to just plug in, but then they had to go get Duvernay. Same thing with Parker but they had to plug in Darby. Same thing with Duvernay, where they had Parker Washington and could have plugged him as a returner, but they still had to go sign someone. And so, like, they had to plug a lot of holes because they didn't really have anyone else on the roster to do so, which is a little bit concerning. Like, they really need to – I remember I got on the podcast in, like, February-ish last year and said the most important part about this offseason is going to be day 3 of the draft because they desperately need depth. And I feel like we're in a pretty similar spot where, like the signings all like made sense on paper and they were plugging in holes, but like would have been nicer if you could have just made 1 or 2 signings and already had a lot of the plugs filled.
That's true. It is harder and harder to buy their bit that they're a draft and develop team. You know, because it's certainly like maybe you want to be, but it certainly doesn't seem like that's the case. But we can get into all those philosophical.
I like that.
How do you say it?
Philosophical.
There you go.
No, I like philosophy.
There we go. I'm a philosopher. That's a good bit. So I'm with you. I think that they still have a lot of questions to answer. I think the Ridley thing was both negatively, a negative in terms of what it did to their roster and was also deeply embarrassing for them to go through. But I also think they made one of their best signings in franchise history in Armstead. So, they could have done worse, I think. I'll say this. I think they had a better free agency period than the Commanders did. And I've seen the Commanders get like A's across the board.
Well, I feel like that's one of the circumstances where it's like some sites will just like give out A's to the people who like paid the most money and brought in the most new faces.
And maybe not even that, like places that like signed the most mid players, I think.
Yeah.
because there's no big contract for them to point out and say this was a bad move, But like every player they've signed, I think it's like, if you want to put it in Madden terms, it's like a 71 overall. Like, where's the good player in this? Which goes back to my rant about them and why cap space isn't necessarily an advantage a couple years ago. Like, oh, that's nice cap space you got there. Let's give it to Marcus Mariota and Bobby Wagner and Doris Armstrong. Like, come on, get real, buddy. Grow up. So,
all right, I've got 2 quick free agency takes. Then I think 2 of the best free agency like grades that I'll give out were the Bengals. I thought had a great free agency in terms of like kind of like plugging in holes, but with like, I don't know, just like solid veteran players that like really made sense for them. So I think they're a good like buy low Super Bowl ticket, considering like Burrow coming off of injury and then like the trade rumors with T. Higgins. And then the Texans I thought had an incredible free agency with the exception of Joe Mixon. Like I did not understand that one at all. Even when it was a trade for a conditional 7th round pick, I was kind of like iffy about it. And then they gave him a 3-year extension. And so maybe he's got more juice left in his tank than I'm giving him credit for. And like in his prime, he was definitely a talented player, but I just don't know if there's very much left. And so that one confused me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. I don't know. There weren't as many deals I thought that made me go, huh? I mean, probably DeAndre Swift. I just don't think. Well, I keep seeing DeAndre Swift and Gerald Everett mentioned in these posts about all the weapons Caleb Williams is going to have. I'm like, you guys can talk about the good players. You don't have to throw those guys in there and think anybody will know this.
Well, I think Swift is like could be a solid player, but just not like that contract is berserk. And then Everett is just like I like the idea of him, but in reality, it's not good.
He's Michael Scott's when he does the blind guy.
yeah.
That's Swift. Like he has physical talent. He can't see. Like, his eyes do not work on the football field. But so I'd probably say the Jaguars had like a mid-tier free agency. So
what would you say like graded on a whole? B minus? B?
Yeah, B minus. And for the record, and this is their right as fans. People are fans to cheer the team on, not the crap on every move. But fans were hella excited, but even before Armstead was signed, and I was like, "Oh, I don't really know what you guys are talking about." Now that Armstead's in the fold, I think it was at the very least like solid.
They got a great splash guy in Armstead, and then a great like minimum guy in Darby. Those are
like to me, they improved at center. They improved at defensive tackle, which were 2 of their biggest holes last year. Safety, I think, is a push. Cornerback, I think, is a push. Return man, I think, is a push. Edge depth is like slightly better. Like Gibson's obviously better than Chase on and etc. But he's still at the end of the day, is what he is. And then they're worse at receiver. So they're, I think, significantly better at 2 key spots and a good bit worse at, and obviously one of the most important spots on the team. They got a little better, I think. If they had kept Ridley, it would have been home run.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, that would have been nice. We'll see. We got 6 more weeks of offseason, and then we rest.
Oh, God, man. I don't want to talk about wide receivers they won't take for 6 weeks, Gus.
Yeah, same.
It's going to be brutal.
My dad is a radio producer for the PGA Tour, and so he was telling me about the players this past weekend, and he said that like there's just like so much work and build up leading up to the event that like when the weekend actually shows up, like he enjoys it a little bit because it's obviously pretty nice to like be out on the course, and it's such a big golf event. But he says that like by the time it actually gets there, he just like wants to be done with it, and that's exactly how I feel about the draft. Is that it's like such a fun event, but for like you and me who like work in the space all year, like it's just such a big buildup that like when we get there, it's going to be done.
It is. The marathon to get there sucks, but I will say it's my favorite like 3 days on the beat is during draft time, sitting there in the media room, everybody getting everybody's reactions to the picks. I thoroughly enjoy those 3 days more than I enjoy most days.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think two of us. All right, Gus, you got anything else?
One last plug. Check out the Jaguar Report YouTube channel if you aren't already. John and I need 500 subscribers to start making like 5 cents a month or whatever our commission is going to be. But I am planning on putting out some film. I've been not doing as good as I would like with film. I feel like I say that on here like once a month. But yeah, I've already started making some Mitch Morse and Gabe Davis film cut-ups. So look for that out on YouTube. If you could click and mostly subscribe, that'd be much appreciated.
Yeah, 100%. Any subscriptions, would obviously be appreciated. I think we're at like 374, so we need 100, maybe plus for, as Trill Withers once said, for me to be able to go to the wife and say, "Put on your nice shoes. We're going to Applebee's." So we're almost at Applebee's money. We'll get there, but we appreciate you guys for listening as always, for sticking with us. I appreciate all the people I gaslight on Twitter by saying both that on Monday and Tuesday we'd have an episode. So here we go. That's how we get the people.
Yeah, we gotta draw them in, right?
Exactly. That's how we get them frothing at the mouth for an episode. So I make them think they're crazy, and it works. It works. It shows in the numbers.
We got our process. Baki's got his process. We got ours.
As always, thank you guys. Don't forget NFL free agency. You got Baki.